in theaters July 17th, 1987. I'm sure you all know the story pretty well. Alex Murphy, a police officer in a dystopian Detroit, Michigan, which really isn't too far off from what Detroit really is. But yes, he is a Detroit police officer, and this story takes place in the near future, which I guess if you watch this now, it takes place at present time. That's weird. But he is eventually ambushed and gets the shit shot out of him by a gang of criminals led by one of the greatest on-screen villains of all time, Clarence Boddicker, who is portrayed by Kurtwood Smith, an actor who is mainly known now for his role on That 70s Show. Because, I mean, really, he wouldn't be that recognized for his role in Rambo 3. When you watch Rambo 3 nowadays, you see him and you're like, oh yeah, I forgot he was in this movie. Is there any more Fritos?
No!
So yes, Clarence Boddicker, and his gang of baddies shoot Officer Murphy to hell and back, destroying his body and leaving him pretty much dead. But the Omni Corporation, a defense contractor who has a bid with the Detroit Police Department, steps in and decides to use Officer Murphy, or what was left of him, for their newest experiment, which is making a human being into a totally mechanized super soldier, replacing his totally fucked up body with a robotic one, making him a supreme police officer. So Officer Murphy lives again. Well, kind of. There's a catch. Just like there's always free cheddar in a mousetrap, and you can't have a deal with the devil without some strings attached. And since the Omni Corporation isn't just a corporation, but it's an evil corporation, you can't have them rebuild your body without having something fucked up involved. Yes, the corrupt corporation didn't do this as a favor, and Murphy now belongs to them, or as he's called now, Robocop. And it's still Murphy's brain, but they inhibited his memories with a bunch of circuits and shit. So he doesn't remember who he really is, but don't worry, he gets his memory back throughout the course of the film. And then he eventually turns on the Omni Corporation, which are his masters, making Robocop not just an action movie, not just a science fiction movie, but also a Frankenstein story.
Yeah, it's really heartfelt and gets you right in the feels.
Sure. I guess you could say that this movie is a very non-conventional, heartwarming tale. And it is very violent and gory. In fact, the original cut of the film was so violent and gory that it received an X rating, making it one of the very few non-porn movies that could make such a boast. Now, as you know, this film was cut down, so it wasn't so violent and gory, but it's still pretty violent and gory, and it received the R rating in which it has today, and which was the rating it had for its reign at the box office. You see, the X rating was really just for test audiences and advanced screenings. And how did this do at the box office? Well, let's head to the budget to box office ratio to find out. It was made on a budget of $13 million and took in $53 million at the box office. So this movie was an instant hit, and even the critics kinda liked it. Which is interesting because critics don't like anything. Really, it seems that the only main complaint about this movie from the critics was the name. They didn't like the name. I mean, come on, what else are you supposed to call it? Yeah, there's always some level of tit for tat when it comes to critics, but all tit for tat aside, this movie was a smash hit. And Robocop was not only the world's newest cyborg, he was also instantly a part of pop culture. And it, oddly enough, predicted DVDs. Yeah, there's a scene where Boddicker plays what appears to be a DVD. This movie was released in '87, so that's weird. And that brings up a pretty good point as to when this movie actually takes place. There are some points of reference within the many comic books Robocop has had that states this movie takes place anywhere between 2015 to 2028. And the film itself never states when this actually takes place. All that we are told is that it takes place in the near future, which is a pretty safe answer. And a pretty vague one, but not too vague that it requires information, just vague enough to stoke your interest. Robocop was released on VHS later on in 1987 by Orion Home Video, and then it wouldn't be released on VHS again until the year 2000. And these distributions are very plentiful today. Very easy to find and pretty damn cheap. Although, oddly enough, the 2000 distribution doesn't seem to be all that common. So what do you do when you have a smash hit rated R franchise? Well, you make a kids' cartoon show about it. Duh. Which aired in 1988 from October to December and is, well, it is what it is. It's not that it's a bad idea to market a product to kids, but when that product is based on a product that kids are not allowed to see, it might not be that genius of an idea. But regardless of all that, this still existed, and it was released on VHS. 3 episodes were released on 3 individual VHS volumes. And these are kind of easy to find today. I mean, you could find a brand new one still sealed for $20 and some used ones for $7, so have at it. The filmography of Robocop just would not stop. And we got a sequel with Robocop 2, which was released in theaters June 22nd, 1990, and would go on to be one of the world's most okay movies ever. Because, well, it's not good, and it's also not bad. It's just kind of okay. I mean, it's Robocop 2. I mean, it's not as good as the first movie, but certainly not as bad as the third, which was released in theaters November 5th, 1993. And this one has a few fatal flaws. For no apparent reason, they decided to make this kind of a family movie. Yeah, it's not really that violent, and it certainly isn't gory at all, which is a stark contrast to the first 2 movies. Hell, the first movie was rated X, and then it got a hard R. The second movie is a total hard R, and now you're going to make the third one PG-13? What are you doing? I mean, I don't have a problem with PG-13 movies, but all I'm saying is, if you're going to start off your so-called trilogy with R ratings, you might want to finish on the same note. But anywho, Robocop 2 was released on VHS later on in 1990 by Orion Home Video, and Robocop 3 was released on VHS in 1994. And both of these movies were released again on VHS in the year 2000, right alongside the first Robocop, which is really the only Robocop you need to watch. And in the late 90s, they released a full trilogy box set. Oh boy. All of these distributions are rather easy to find today, and as you can imagine, rather dirt cheap. However, the trilogy box set does seem to be a little hard to track down. But really, if I were you, I wouldn't even bother. Now, aside from the movies and the cartoon show, Robocop was involved in all sorts of hijinks. He was the subject of not 1 but 2 television shows. There was Robocop the series from 1994 and Robocop Prime Directives from the year 2000. And yes, both of these are available on VHS. But the most famous accolade of hijinks has to be when he got involved with pro wrestling. Yes, believe it or not, he was involved in the WCW 1990 pay-per-view event Capital Combat. Now, I'm not sure what WCW is trying to have me believe. That Robocop is real, or that wrestling isn't. Yeah, so I guess we're just throwing kayfabe right out the window, huh? This was an effort of cross-promotion, and it was a clever, albeit strange way to promote Robocop 2. And yes, this was released on VHS, but since it's old pro wrestling, it's worth a small fortune. I am not paying $150 for Capital Combat.